Thank you for joining the Pasco School Board of Directors for a regularly scheduled board meeting this evening. As always, these meetings are open public meetings, and we broadcast them for playback on Charter Cable TV channel 191, and you can also see it if you go to YouTube and search Pasco Schools. It may seem at times that the board is moving quickly on some decisions, but we've always had time to thoroughly research the topics at hand, either through our own independent research, through questioning of school district and Ms. Whitney's staff, or in public meetings that are either study sessions or other board meetings that we have. Also, we have 3 student board representatives seated up here this evening with us. While they're not legally allowed to vote, they're an important part of our decision-making process. We're happy to have them. We're happy to have them increase student voice to the board. And like I said, all of our board meetings are open public meetings. In addition to that, our study sessions are open public meetings. We had a good presentation at our study session this afternoon from all of the district's early learning partners. And we're going to open our own district early learning center at the beginning of 2018. So we talked about that. We talked about our partners and the additional opportunities that we're having as a district for families, for students, and for the community to help our earliest learners. So if you're interested in that topic, I would encourage you to watch that study session either on YouTube or on Charter Cable TV. And with that, we'll move on to agenda item number 2, which is the flag salute. We have Markham Elementary Principal Kim Mahaffey here to introduce his students.
Thank you, Superintendent Whitney, President Lehrman, and Pasco School Board members. I have 3 outstanding students from Markham Elementary. If you 3 students could come join me up here, I'll introduce you. They were excited, well, mostly nervous about coming. I have Sydney Stinson, Soraya Hells, and Colton Clark, 6th grade students at Markham, and they are here representing our Markham student body. Grateful to have them here with us tonight and have them lead us in the flag salute. So we'll have Colton come on up.
May the audience please rise and repeat with me the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The audience may be seated.
All right, and then at this time, students, if you guys have friends or family here that you'd like to introduce, after they take your picture here, we'll have you introduce your friends and family. And our student board reps have a Pride of Pasco pin here for you. All students that come in, we encourage you guys to continue your student service and your student leadership. And when you guys are juniors or seniors in high school, we encourage you to apply to be a student board rep and come do what these young ladies are doing this year for us. So if you want to go ahead and approach the microphone and introduce your family at this time, we would love to give them recognition.
Hello, my name is Sydney Stenson, and my parents are right here in the second row. Hi, my name is Soraya Hales, and my dad, James Hales, is not present today, but my mom in the back is present. Her name is Michaela Hales.
My dad could not make it today because of work, but my mom is back there in the back row, right next to her mom.
And Mr. Mahaffey, were these students, are they ASB officers? Are they in leadership in some way?
They were picked by teachers to represent the whole student body, so they're part of the 6th grade leadership team.
Okay. Well, thank you, students, for coming. Thank you for being leadership part of the team and also for being role models. Your teachers must have selected you as role models for your school. And again, like I said, when you're in 11th or 12th grade, if you're still in the Pasco School District, please apply to be a student board representative at that time. All right, next we'll move on to agenda item number 3. We have roll call. Ms. Smith, please call the roll.
Mr. Christensen?
Present.
Dr. Richardson?
Present.
Ms. Lansing?
Present.
Ms. Craig?
Present.
Mr. Lerman?
Present.
Mrs. Phillips?
Present.
Ms. Rocha?
Present.
Ms. Fields?
Present.
Sure they're not here. Next, moving on to agenda item number 4, we have special recognition. We have a certificate here for Dutch Brothers being partners in kindness. So Mr. Shane Heddinger will get that certificate to them. They weren't able to attend this evening. Agenda item number 5 is the approval of meeting minutes. I would entertain a motion to approve meeting minutes from September 12th.
Mr. President, I move to approve the regular meeting minutes of September the 12th, 2017.
Second.
There's a motion and a second to approve the meeting minutes from September 12th, 2017. All those in favor, please say yes. Yes. Opposed, no. Motion carries to approve regular meeting minutes from September 12th, 2017. Next, we have the agenda review.
There are no additions or changes to tonight's agenda. However, I would like to call the board's attention to our request for an executive session under RCW 4230, 110-1G for personnel.
Okay, moving on to agenda item number 7. We have audience comments. In just a moment, I'll invite the audience up to address the board. You can ask questions or present to us anything that you would like to have a dialogue or conversation with the board on. If you would like additional conversation or dialogue than you get this evening, please ensure that your contact information is left in the back corner with either your email address and or phone number, and we will get back to you. Please try to limit your comments to 2 minutes, and the microphone is open at this time. All right, seeing that we have no audience comments at this time, I would remind you that after agenda items number 9, after each report and discussion, and also this evening we don't have an action item, but when we have action items, I would invite you up at that time to ask questions of the board or make comments to the board on those topics at that time if you'd like. So next we'll move on to agenda item number 9, reports and discussion. We'll move on to agenda item number 8, board communications, and we'll start with Dr. Richardson.
Thank you. So last week I had the opportunity to attend the visit from Superintendent Reichel with all of our board members there, where he announced the state's plans moving forward to meet the federal requirements with regards to the ESSA law. And I think we all had a lot of smiles on our faces because the plan that he described was very much in line with a lot of the priorities that we've set as a school district. 2 that he specifically mentioned were the performance in 9th grade, kind of really making sure that our 9th graders are on track for graduation. And another thing he mentioned was expanding technical and other opportunities for students that may not want to go to university, but making sure that we are providing a path for everyone, a career path after graduation. And so those 2 I really kind of stuck out to me. I appreciate visiting a number of classrooms. There was a student, Perla, in one of the classes that I really hounded about archaeology. She was telling me all about that and how excited she was and teaching me all that she'd learned. And I spent a long time with her and looked up, and pretty much everyone had left the room, and I was still talking to the same student. And so she did a great job, and it's always nice to meet the students and see what they're learning. So thank you, Ms. Aragon, and for letting us, for hosting that event.
I wanted to agree, I'll agree with him about the Curry adventure, I should say. That, you know, the students at Curry were just, they were great. All of the classrooms that we were visited, they all participated, and the, was it the 5th grade class or the 6th grade class that asked all kinds of questions? They came forward and asked questions of everyone that was there to participate, but they were all great classroom discussions. I've visited quite a few schools over the last few weeks, but I've been to Stevens and Chess, Pasco High School, Emerson, Longfellow, Franklin, McClintock, Whittier, Robinson, Ochoa, and I've just been so impressed with all of the teachers and all of the, you can walk into any classroom at any time, and they are the students are fully engaged, and there's no interruption. So if somebody walks in, they're fully engaged and still working, and it's no interruption when you walk in. And so it's a great atmosphere, and I really appreciate all of the teachers in Pasco. They're doing a great job, and thank you for allowing me to visit. I really appreciate it.
Also had the opportunity to attend the Superintendent Rakedahl's visit and hear his proposals for ESSA, and visit with some of the students there. Last week, Assistant Superintendent, I guess, Reyes and myself attended a meeting or a presentation on green buildings. Since we're going to be building some buildings and have built some buildings, I thought it would be interesting to see what they talk about for green buildings. One of the things that's probably the biggest cost is the heating of a building, and they're doing some things that are innovative there. They claim that you can save quite a bit of money just on energy costs, and that the cost of construction is minimal, less than 5% to save over 30% on energy. So that was an interesting presentation there. This last weekend, I was in Tukwila at the WASDA Legislative Assembly. This is where all the school districts are invited to the annual Legislative Assembly, where the legislative positions for the upcoming session are all discussed. And there was a number of presentations there. Superintendent Rakedahl was there again. There was a panel that talked about compensation, trying to understand some of the impacts of the new legislation, and that's going to take a little adjusting to. I can tell you for sure that there are many school districts, probably every school district is concerned about that. The regionalization factor is a big concern. We had a presentation on capital budget by Brian Sims. Brian Sims, I think that's his name, used to be one of the capital budget writers in the Senate, one of the staff for capital budget in the Senate. And then another presentation on building relationships with legislators during the off-season, as they call it. So, and I think this is a good time for us to maybe start inviting some of our legislators down to see some of the things that are happening in our district. And especially if we want some influence with them when it comes time to talk about our compensation and regionalization, they need to know how we feel and how that impacts us. So, good week. And then probably my most favorite part was the football game. Some of the young men that I work with in scouting are on the freshman team. And I went to the Pasco versus, I think it was Southridge game. It was a good game. They didn't start off too good, but at the end they came back and won the game. It was quite exciting. So anyway, that's my past 2 weeks.
I also went to Cary STEM, and it's such a beautiful school. Like, I haven't really been in a lot of the elementary schools here other than my little brother's school, and it's so beautiful. I wish I could have gone to an elementary school like that. And the kids were all so great, and they all were doing all these essays, knowing exactly what they wanted to do. And I was talking to some of them, and I do law enforcement for Tri-Tech, and one of the girls was telling me that she wanted to be a detective, and I was telling her about the Tri-Tech program, that she could do that in high school. And I met State Superintendent Rakedahl, is that how you say his name? And he's such a great guy, and it was really cool to talk to him and talk to him about what I wanted to do for my future, and he seems like he has a lot of good plans for our schools.
Hi, all I just wanted to say today is next week at Pasco High School we will be having a Suicide Awareness Week. This is something very important to us. Also, there will be testing coming up for us, such as the voice for the freshmen, the PSAT for the sophomores and juniors, and then the seniors will just be doing college readiness things.
Hello everybody, and before I even start, I'll have to say excuse my voice. I believe I have caught a cold. The last 2 weeks for me have actually been going pretty fast. I got accepted into the National Honor Society, which I was anxiously awaiting this, so but it's actually been pretty good. Our Suicide Prevention Week has actually just started, I think, today. I know that the leadership kids went around and went into freshman classrooms today, and that's very informative for them, and I know that they got a lot of good results back from that. But even those two things, it's been going pretty swell, so thank you.
Yeah, as a parent and a school board member, it's a busy time of year starting school. It's an exciting time of year, and you start to feel that crisp feel in the air, and as fall comes upon us. So it's been exciting. A lot of what I've been involved in lately has been the Board of Distinction. We try to apply every year for this Board of Distinction. It's really good for our board as it helps us all to review things that make good boards successful. And they found that good boards have higher student achievement. It's directly related to student achievement. So it's really important that we do our work and we do it well. And this is another way. We do a self-evaluation every single year, and then we try to apply to this. And it's quite time-consuming. But one thing that I found, it's also really exciting. And one thing that I found was they've shortened it this year, I'm sure, because reading through all of these applications throughout the state of Washington is time-consuming. But putting in all the work that's going on in Pasco right now in this much space is pretty tough. And that's been a challenge. One of the WASDA people who have come to visit us at one point approached me and said, I have never seen a school district take on the scope of work that this school district is taking on. And it is phenomenal. The work that's going on here is phenomenal. I have no doubt there are incredible things coming. I really feel like things are drastically improving in this district in a lot of different ways and across the board. And I appreciate so many of those that are making these things happen. So that was exciting. It was also really, I think it's very telling that the superintendent of the state of Washington wanted to make that announcement in Pasco High School. I think he recognizes what's going on in Pasco, and I think he recognizes there's going to be great growth coming. That's my opinion. I don't know why he came to Pasco to make the announcements, but the other thing was how in line Pasco is to the things that they're changing. Another thing, I was really excited to know that so many of the things that we're pushing for, like Mr. Richardson or Dr. Richardson said in the ninth grade, really focusing on ninth grade because we know that's a key time that things have to happen by, and then really focusing on realizing that all kids aren't going to go to the university, and they're not, and we don't want everybody to go to the university. There are so many different careers out there that serve our community that don't require a college education, but continuing education and certificates and having our kids trained so that they can make some money, not just entry level, is critical. And he had an emphasis on that. He also had an emphasis on a different way of grading schools, to give schools a grade, realizing that testing isn't the only way to grade a school to see how they're doing. There's lots of other ways, like growth and lots of different things that are going into that. So I think that is also exciting. So it was great hearing from him. It was also really great to be able to tour Curie and see some of those teachers at work. It's fun to watch the teachers in action and listen to the kids, and they're incredible. So it's been an exciting couple of weeks.
I too enjoyed Superintendent Reichdel's coming here and talking about the Every Student Succeeds Act in Washington State. And like several of the board members said, a lot of what he was talking about aligned with stuff that we have already been talking about for the past year or two here in Pasco. And so it also ties into the Boards of Distinction application. So I asked Ms. Smith and Ms. Whitney to put this letter up because I wanted to tell you, I wrote this letter, this cover letter the other day, and I was kind of typing faster than my brain actually thought, and this is the application to the Boards of Distinction. But I was going to say that I believe that what our board's doing is in alignment, and in some cases, I wrote it on my first draft, and in some cases leads, what we're going to be doing as a state for ESSA. I took out the part where I said I think we're leading the state right now in an attempt to be humble for what we're doing here. But I wanted to share this with you because it shows in a bulleted list, I think, some of the stuff that the board's been focused on, and we hope that the work we've been doing helps the staff here, teachers do their job easier, and we believe that what happens with the work we've been doing here will lead to closing the opportunity gap and increasing student achievement across the board. So I don't know how many of you can read it, but what it says is, it says, thank you for providing us this opportunity to reflect on the work we've done in the past year to ensure the success of every student in Pasco. This reflective process has made us even more proud of the hard work done by the board to provide district staff through our superintendent with the following direction over the past year. We've been focusing on the reduction in efficiency and standardized testing, leading to more instructional time. We had a presentation from district staff at our last board meeting on that. That's something that the community's been telling us is really important to them also, and to many parents. We're increasing our early learning opportunities. We had a study session I mentioned earlier this afternoon at 4:30 on that, if you're interested in seeing that. We had the board creation of 5 outrageous outcomes to effectively close the opportunity gaps. And so the board came up with these 5 outrageous outcomes, and then from there it took much district work and alignment with principals and staff to polish those off and come up with the benchmarks. So while we came up with the high-level idea for these, we give all credit where it's due to the staff for implementing it and making it happen there. We also have created board operational expectations for the superintendent that provide boundaries and guidance for the superintendent to do work more effectively and efficiently. And we've had an additional focus on decision-making driven by student achievement data. And then next is where I said, we believe that the outrageous outcomes will align well with Washington's Every Student Succeeds Act and closing the opportunity gap and improving student achievement in Pasco. So we're blessed with staff and a superintendent that helps make the vision that we work hard as volunteers to come up with happen. And again, we know that the staff, teachers, and families are what really makes this place go. So we're just blessed to serve on the board here, and we thank you all. But if you have any questions on any of those 5 bullets there as to what they are or how they're helping students and families in Pasco, feel free to ask any of us board members. But it's really been a focus in our board meetings, and we're excited to share in the future successes with the whole community on this. All right, so Ms. Whitney says she doesn't have anything to add at this time. Next, we'll move on to agenda item number 9, reports and discussion. Start out with agenda number 9A, board policy revisions, presented by Ms. Thornton.
Good evening, Board President Lehrman, members of the board, Superintendent Hill. The first set of policies that I have for you tonight are the second set of health-related policies that I referenced for you 2 weeks ago. We have 3 recommendations, 1 new policy and 2 updates. Policy 3417 is being updated to include language that exists in the law around catheterization. We do have some students who require catheterization during school hours, and there's language protecting staff who, giving them the option to opt out of performing that duty if they weren't specifically hired to do that. Policy 3418, response to student injury, has not been updated since 1994, so we are significantly revising that. And then policy 3419 is a new policy related to self-administration of asthma and anaphylaxis medications, so typically EpiPens or asthma inhalers for students who need those during the school day. And if there are no questions related to these revisions, we'll bring these back to you at the next board meeting on the consent agenda.
Any questions for Ms. Thornton at this time on these policies? Okay, next we'll move on to 9B, board policy revision on naming of facilities.
All right. This policy revision of 9250 was brought to our attention most recently during the most recent facilities naming process, where it came to our attention that there was not a lot of clarity around the parameters that a naming committee would use. And so we're recommending a revision to the policy that incorporates some WASDA recommended model language. We are also going to be, or we have updated the procedures to further clarify the role of the committee in that process, which is to evaluate the community input and make those recommendations to the board. Excuse me.
Next, we'll we'll skip agenda number 9C. Ms. Whitney will present that, and we'll have Ms. Thornton stay up if you would, Ms. Thornton, and present agenda number 9D.
Thank you.
Response to public comment from the board on elections.
Okay.
Can I make a comment on the naming facilities? Just reading through that, it seems like we either need to name our schools after a person or geographical characteristics. So I know that we were at one point we've been approached with names that fall outside of that, and I'm not sure we're against them. Is that what that says, or am I misreading it?
That's what the recommended revision is, and that's what's contained in the WASDA model policy language. So if that's something that the board wants to expand, that certainly is something we can add.
So I know that there were 2 sets of names that we chose between the STEM high schools. One of them were all named after, one of the choices were all named after different space shuttles. The other were names, is that correct? The Voyager and Space programs. Would that fit within this, or would it not?
It would not.
Okay, I'm not sure I totally agree with this one then. I just think we're narrowing the field a little too tightly, but that's my opinion.
So this is first reading. Let's put everyone put their thoughts together on how they feel about this language, and if you have additional suggestions, we can have additional conversation before taking action.
You bet.
All right, thank you. Any other questions? Go ahead.
I've talked to, and I know I talked to Joelle, well, not talked specifically about this, but mentioned it, about the naming when Chiawana came into, I was like, oh, how'd Chiawana get its name? And they said that Pasco High School actually had the opportunity to go to all the kids and, oh, well, what name suggestions did you have? And I was like, oh, that's interesting. So I talked to more Pasco High School kids that are older, and I asked them the same question, and they said, well, yeah, but none of their suggestions were used. But so I don't know, is that the same type of process for this one, or is it just board members too?
So as I recall that process, there was a naming committee, and the recommendations for names were sought from the entire community. It wasn't just recommendations from the kids at Pasco High School. I think that they went through the process with Chiawana to choose the school colors, involved just the students at Pasco High School, as I remember. But the naming process followed this similar procedure where the whole community sent in names and the community made recommendations to the board.
So do you want to even qualify under this?
Yes.
Or because it's Big River, it means Big River?
Geographic representation.
Okay.
Do we have any school, almost every school, other school other than Pasco High, right, is named after a person? Is that, what else do we have?
Correct. We have all of our elementary schools are named after various prominent figures, either to the community or related to education. The same with our middle schools. Pasco High, Chiawana are
Geographic.
regional.
So every school we have at this time falls under this proposed language here.
With the exception of New Horizons and Delta, and those schools were effectively named outside of this process because they both started as cooperatives.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments from the board?
Just a comment. I'm not sure how we can word this. I certainly wouldn't want to lock us into this. I mean, certainly if we follow tradition, this is what we would do, but it seems like this might be a little restrictive. So we've got to name an early learning center, and I'm not sure any of the names that were, I don't remember all of them. I remember some of them, but the ones I remember, I'm not sure would qualify in this way. And I don't, I think it's good to emphasize, if we can, that we want to stay with tradition but not lock us in. So I don't know what way you can word that if you can, but it seems...
I think a simple revision would be to change the word shall to are encouraged or is encouraged, and allow for a process whereby the board can establish different parameters. I actually think that language would be pretty simple to add without changing the emphasis. With regards to the Early Learning Center, I believe that once we've given some clarity to the procedures and revised the policy, then that would be turned back over to that committee to continue their work.
Thank you.
I agree. I think if we could just put in encouraged or something like that instead of being restrictive, because I don't want to restrict it to being just...
And I think the Early Learning Center would be one that could fall out of, could come out of these parameters. What I want to make sure happens is when we ask the student body of Pasco, can you come, if we need to make sure when we ask that we make it clear what names we're going to use, how we're going to go about the process. I think that's critical. I don't want a naming committee that could possibly bring in their own personal names and just name them after that. I don't really want a naming committee that said, oh, this is my best friend. I want something that's community-driven, community brought in, and community and chosen from the community. I think that's critical. And but like I said, the Early Learning Center might be one that falls outside of naming it after a person. So yes, I'd like to change this up a little bit.
Did you say that the guidance for committees would be not in policy but somewhere else, or you're going? It's a procedure.
In the procedures, correct.
Can you send us Do we have a draft of that procedure?
You bet.
Send us a draft of that before the next reading also.
You bet.
All right, thank you. All right, are there any questions or comments from the audience on agenda items 9A or 9B at this time, both policy revisions? All right, seeing we have no public comment, then we will move on to agenda item number 9C, or sorry, 9D.
9D. Thank you, President Lehrman. Staff is requesting direction from the board on an issue that was brought to you during the regular board meeting on July 25th during the public comment period. A community member raised a concern that the current makeup of the board does not reflect representation from neighborhoods in Central or East Pasco, and cited a concern of the district's potential vulnerability to litigation given the challenges that have occurred both in the city of Pasco and the city of Yakima in the last few years. The legal reference was also cited, which is the RCW that gives a director district board of directors, which is an at-large board of directors, which is what Pasco School District currently has, the mechanism to put to the voters a proposition to change the election system of the board to director districts. And so my purpose in bringing this to you this evening, I don't have further information for you about those processes, but I would like to request board direction on how to move forward in response to that public comment and whether the board wishes to give direction for further work from staff.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Thornton. So we'll ask questions of Ms. Thornton, and then if board members, after we have discussion, we'll take an informal poll here and give direction for the district to further pursue research on this or not. So any questions or comments from the board to Ms. Thornton at this time?
Well, I guess maybe one of the things we could start with do you know how many districts in the state are districted? When I say districts, school districts are districted versus at large? And have school districts been a target? I mean, I would expect we probably are because of the makeup of our board and of our community that we might be a target, but
I don't specifically know the answer to your first question, Mr. Christensen, but I can find out. With regards to your second question, we are not aware of any specifically planned legal action or intended legal action against the district. However, we do know that there was some public testimony in Olympia this past session when they were considering legislation on a Washington Voting Rights Act, and they did specifically cite Pasco School District as an example of a district of concern.
Could you send us that info as well?
Sure.
On the reference to the Pasco School District. So I guess I haven't researched how many districts are in the state. I know a couple big ones just from us going to WASDA and stuff, I believe, like Spokane and Seattle. And I haven't, again, done the simple research to see how many other districts across the state are districted. But I guess I would be, in addition to knowing how many of them are, when they became districted versus at-large positions. Have they been for a long time, or has it been in response to something like this in the past, recent past?
So I did contact WASDA with that same request that you guys are making, and they sent me an Excel file, but I haven't had a chance to look through it all, and it's quite long, and I think there's a lot of factors that I think there may be some mixed districts. I think like some of the cities where there's some districted positions, some at-large positions, and I don't think it had on there what year they last changed, but it looks like they have that information, but it's going to take some legwork to sort out. And then also, do we want to compare to large districts, medium districts, small districts, which is a much different situation, a little tiny school district compared to a larger district. But it looks like that data is available, that we should be able to get it.
Okay. Can you send what you have to Ms. Thornton, and she can distribute it to the board as well? Thank you.
I'm in favor of bringing this further. I think it's really important that we have a board that better represents the demographics of our community. And I realize that might be talking myself out of a job, and I'm okay with that. I think it's critical that we have a voice that represents all of our community. And right now, I believe most of us all live in the west side of Pasco, and I think I don't think that's the best thing for our district. I think it would be better to be more diverse. I have thought about this a lot. I've looked into it. There are some problems that sometimes districting creates, and those problems are real, and they can actually be very disruptive to a board. And so I think we need to go about this very intelligently to make sure that we have really good representation for our schools, and we have people who are very vested in doing what's best for our schools. So I'd like to look into this further, and I think that this could be a really positive thing for our district.
I would support additional research on this as well, and bringing it back to the board. And as some district staffs has told me, and also what Mrs. Phillips has said, there's pros and cons to everything. And then I've also heard there's other options to account for voter dilution. I'm not sure what those options are, but I'd like to see this option and then other options to address voter dilution.
I agree. I think I'd like more information on it. I think that's fine to look into kind of what the timeline process would look like, what historically has happened, and what our current makeup and the current makeup in school districts in our state, or school boards in the state, is. I agree. There's definitely some benefits and probably some drawbacks. That, you look at these small districts. If you follow the voting in some areas, and they can't get people to run, and so it's and that's been an issue in our city. Even the last election where I ran, my race, there were just two of us, and I think Mr. Lerm was unopposed for a long time, and then there was a write-in candidate. So I'd like to look back and see what all the historical data is, but it's not. Like people are, this year was much better. I'd love to see lots of candidates running, and that's very good for our community, but I think it could have unintended consequences. The other thing I'll mention is, we're kind of talking about two different things when we say that we want this by neighborhood and we want different, racial or ethnic representation. That's not necessarily the same thing. So, there's these types of questions that are tricky. And so, but yeah, I agree. I'm happy I think it's good to get more information and kind of see what the process and timeline would look like, and kind of what our current state makeup is right now.
Any other comments from the board at this time? All right, before we take our unofficial board poll, any questions or comments thank you, Ms. Thornton, from the audience to the board on this topic? All right, thank you. So I think I heard Mr. Richardson say in favor of additional research, and we'll have another presentation at a later time. Ms. Lankin, yes. Mr. Christensen, yes. Ms. Phillips, yes. Myself, yes. So unanimous direction to the staff to answer the questions that were brought up tonight, and we'll work with Ms. Whitney and get this on the agenda in the near future. Thank you. All right, next we have agenda item number 9C. We have outrageous outcomes and a data bite on reading goals from Ms. Whitney.
Thank you, Superintendent Scott. you're the board president, I'm the superintendent. So good evening, Board President Lehrman, members of the board. It is my pleasure to be in front of you this evening to do round 2 of the updates on our outrageous outcomes, the body of work that we've created together. Just as a reminder, these are our 5 outrageous outcomes. Tonight's report is specific around 100% of all 3rd graders will read on grade level in their language of instruction. This graph represents certainly what we hope this body of work will do over time for us. We are a learning organization. We recognize that every opportunity for us to analyze data or accept feedback from others or input is an opportunity to learn and grow, and we're absolutely happy to do that. I did want to provide just a slight context as a reminder to the board on kind of where we've been. So in 2015-16, if you remember back when I was young in 2015-16, there was a curriculum committee. There were many curriculum committees that were formed. Tonight, I'm only talking about the ELA committee as it's the one that applies to the reading goal. And certainly what I'm going to discuss isn't comprehensive of all the work that was done in 15-16, but just some highlights. Curriculum committee was formed and selected, and the board adopted a core set of English language arts materials for K-11. That summer, there was training regarding those materials and also training about the concept of a curriculum framework. Those frameworks started to be developed and people were trained on those frameworks. We also hired English language arts coaches. So each of our elementary schools had a halftime ELA coach. Our middle schools and high schools already had coaches. And at that point, our pre-K initiative was really around ECAP slots. So in 15-16, that was what we were focused on as ECAP slots. And then fast forwarding to 16-17, that was our first year with this last year was our first year with new curriculum materials. And that required some ongoing refinement of our curriculum frameworks and materials training throughout the year. We really dug in and selected a coaching model. So student-centered coaching is the model that our ELA coaches and mathematics coaches are using now to deliver coaching to our teachers. Those coaches received that training this summer. So during the school year of the 2016-17 school year, there was a process that staff went through with teachers to identify student-centered coaching as the coaching model, and then our coaches and principals received that training this summer. Simultaneously, the assessment committee, the collaborative between PSD and PAE, was formed during the 16-17 school year, and if you recall, that work was really focused on streamlining our assessment system with a lens on maximizing time on instruction. So we were able to replace 5 different assessments with one assessment. That was a report that was given to you, I believe, last board meeting, where we're now using the STAR in addition to others, but the STAR was identified to replace approximately 5 assessments to streamline that process. And we shifted our focus from not only delivering ECAP slots and expanding those ECAP slots, but to implementing what we call a continuum of early learning service, of which you heard during our study session this evening. We spent about an hour and a half highlighting those partnerships and what is involved in, again, that continuum of early learning instruction, which absolutely includes ECAP, but it also includes a lot of other opportunities for people to engage. So just a reminder of some of the work that's been done to this point. The next slides represent our data benchmarks. We identified the WAKIDS data as a set of data that we would be looking at to inform how we feel about our system structures and start to identify where we might need to be looking at our system differently. So just to orient you to this data, the first 2 bars is our language. So it's the extent to which our incoming kindergartners are expressing a set of skills around language. And the first bar is 2016, the second bar is 2017. The blue represents students, incoming kindergartners who are exhibiting the skills that you would expect of a 4-year-old, and then the green is those that would be expected of a 5-year-old. So overall, about 0.9 fewer students are exhibiting, of the incoming kindergartners were exhibiting language skills expected of a 4-year-old, and about 1.3% fewer students were exhibiting those expected of a 5-year-old. So overall, about 2.2% fewer students exhibited those skills that we would hope to see that align with 4 and 5-year-old expectation. 0.4% and 0.5 or 0.8% of students in the literacy are the next two bars. Again, there's 0.4 fewer students exhibiting literacy skills expected of a 4-year-old, 0.8 fewer students representing or exhibiting literacy skills expected of 5-year-olds. So overall, about 1.2% fewer students are exhibiting literacy skills expected of 4 and 5-year-olds. We had a discussion with the Ready for Kindergarten partners this evening about how we might look at collecting cohort data over time so that we can see how our pre-K continuum of services is impacting this data over time. And I expressed to the board that Christy Dawkin and Mark Garrett will be in front of you later on this fall to give an update on our WAKIDS data, and at that time we would be able to talk to you about the mechanisms we're exploring to do that.
I have a question.
Sure.
Speaking of cohorts, so in the bottom left corner where it says 43.7% of 4-year-olds in 2015 were ready for literacy in kinder. Is that cohort the same as if you go up and to the right where it says 36.6 in 2016 you had 5-year-olds? Are those the same cohorts or are those different?
They would be different. These are incoming kindergartners. So
we
it's
have 4-year-old incoming?
These are incoming kindergartners that are exhibiting skills you would expect of a 4-year-old.
Incoming, yeah.
So they're not it's different than
They're
the
not
data that
4-year-olds.
No. It's different than the data that the ECAP presentation. This is the incoming kindergartners in 15, and then a different group of incoming kindergartners in 16. So you're comparing the readiness of two different kindergarten groups.
But so what you're saying is they're all going into kindergarten.
Correct.
Some are performing at a 5-year-old level.
Correct.
Others are performing at a 4-year-old level.
Correct. And if they're
5 or 6 years old.
And if they're not on the chart, they could be performing at a 3-year-old or below. So we're just
4-year-olds ready.
Or a
4-year-olds considered ready, but
I would say that a 5-year-old is ready, but we're here as we're representing both of those data points for you.
so the blue may not be ready.
Yeah, 5-year, you start kindergarten age 5, so you would expect the 5-year-olds to all
Okay.
be able to meet.
So
all
only
the
green is ready for kinder
Right.
in our mind at this point. Okay. Thank you.
Well, there's 20% unaccounted for. Some of them could be higher, correct?
No.
No.
The 5-year-old will include 5 or above. And also, these are just 2 of the 6 domains.
That's right.
If you look at all the domains, it's going to add up to where the data that we had last year that I was sent was about 7% were prepared in all 6 domains at a 5-year-old level. So essentially what we would say, that child is ready in all domains, how they should be for being 5 years old.
Well, and another gigantic caveat that I failed to mention, I apologize, is that this data only represents those students who took the test in English. So there's a large percentage of our students who are missing. And if you remember, that's a data anomaly that I finally believe I've cracked the code with, and OSPI has assured me that in the 17-18 data that would be rectified. So the 17-18 WAKIDS data is going to be the first time that we've been able to display for you both English and Spanish in the same data.
Keep those separate since this is going to really skew numbers then?
Well, we would have to. I mean, we'll have to talk about it separately because it's not going to be an apples-to-apples comparison. And that's been a Herculean effort by a number of us in the district. And then I finally got connected with someone at the state that could help me navigate through that system, and they've assured me it would be rectified for 17 and 18.
From what I understand, this has been a decade effort.
Yes, ma'am.
That's amazing.
It's all about perseverance, Mrs. Phillips.
So one more question. So driving down the blue percentages could be considered a positive as long as we're driving up
Correct.
green. So
Correct.
in the future, if we had some of these trending down and
Correct.
some trending up, that would be a win across
Correct.
the board. Okay. All right. Thank you.
You know what? I think this is a prime example of where we're going in the next 4 years. We are just, so far all we have trained are child care providers. That's what we focused on. Now we're instating ready for kindergarten. There's going to be this whole continuum that is going to change these numbers. This is going to be very exciting. Right now, the numbers don't look great, and I don't think we expect them to look great yet. But we're, they're fairly flat, but we're getting there, and I think the things we're doing are going to greatly change these numbers. So this is exciting.
So your point is well taken. So the students that are showing in that 16-17 data, the only option we had for them were pre-K slots, the ECAP slots in 15-16, where again, the presentation that you heard in 16-17, we now have a continuum of services where, for example, you have 257 families participating in Kaleidoscope Learn and Play. You have 74 child care providers who, we heard one of the child care providers that is coming to be trained has 70 students that they're impacting. So the volume of students just in a year's time in a beginning set of initiatives that have been impacted is really quite impressive, and I think very encouraging and inspiring for us to continue to expand those partnerships.
One more question before we leave this. How does is there a statewide average? There must be that we're...
So that's a great question, and I'm going to touch on that a little bit on the last slide, and it's a great question. So did I skip a slide? I did. I apologize. Yeah. So the next data benchmark is identified as students that were indicated on reading, students reading on level as indicated by the report card. So this data represents in 15-16, that's those grouped under the 16 label, and then in 16-17, those are the data grouped under the 17 label. These are students that were reported on the report card as being on level in reading. And so when you compare those 2 years, we have 4.5% more first graders reading on grade level, about 0.3% more second graders, and then 1.7% more third graders. Now, what's interesting about this data, and we had some I had a really extensive conversation with Mark Garrett about this, is so you can look at the data this way, and you can kind of look at, okay, so where were our first graders last year? Where are our first graders this year? Another way that you could look at it is by cohort. So you could look at the blue bar in 2016 and compare that to the purple bar in 2017. And when you do that, you see that there's an increase. These are loosely cohort data, so they may not be the exact same students because of mobility, et cetera. But that's another way that you can look at data. Tonight, we chose just to do a year-to-year comparison because we didn't account for the cohort anomalies in the data, but moving forward, we may choose to present some cohort data. We may also choose to add to our data benchmarks. For example, the STAR test is new to us. I think that particular assessment is going to be very powerful for us as a district because of the consistency across the K-12 span or K-9 span, the fact that it's available in both English and Spanish. And there's a lot of also powerful predictive tools with that assessment. So as we learn more and really uncover the potential, we'll want to harness that potential. And so we may bring this back to you and say, you know what, we're making some changes to the data benchmarks as we learn more about the power of that system. The last slide I'd show you in our data benchmarks is those students who are meeting state standard. We're down by about 2.2% from last year to this year in those students who met standard on the reading assessment. That then brings us to those things that we've done over the course of the last year. We worked with stakeholder groups and our principals to really get clear about if we're serious about kids mastering reading by third grade, what are those initiatives that are going to be our key initiatives? So certainly early learning will continue to be an initiative for us. Again, you heard an in-depth presentation. The status here represents either completed or ongoing initiatives or those things that have been initiated. So the green dot means completed, the green dot with a white arrow means ongoing, and the yellow diamond means something that we've initiated. This slide represents another key set of initiatives, and while the The graphic is simple, the work is not. This represents our diamond of, or our continuum of instruction that starts with, again, that streamlined assessment system so that we're sure we're using quality data to identify if our students need access to rigorous courses of instruction. This fall, I believe in August, you had an in-depth report about those things that we're offering for our students that are on the right side of the diamond that are considered rigorous courses of study. And then I believe it was the last meeting, you had a presentation about those things that we're doing that are considered intervention and acceleration. We are scheduled to bring a data bite to you on some Read 180 data, which is one of the interventions that we're finding is being very successful with our students in accelerating their learning. So we'll bring that data bite to you to share some very specific data around that particular intervention. So again, while it's a simple graphic, the body of work attached to it is very in-depth and complex, and we believe it'll be a game changer for the organization to have those specific things identified. And then lastly is about making sure that our teachers have access and paraprofessionals have access to high quality professional development. We want a high quality professional in every position in this organization. So we have provided training on Washington State Learning Standards. We are continuing to expand and improve our new teacher training and mentoring program. Again, I mentioned the English language arts coaches and the model that's been identified to help support the coaches in doing their work, a focus on teacher and paraprofessional professional development. And then lastly, the regular cycle of feedback to adjust our frameworks. The body of work that's been done around what started as our rigorous curriculum design frameworks, and the number of teachers that have had what I call fingerprints on that work, or we talk about fingerprints on that work, is really extraordinary. Teachers are highly committed to this work, and it's their expertise that are going to provide the appropriate blueprint for us to apply the materials to our students that is really going to move the needle in terms of student success. So we have a lot of gratitude to our teachers for the work that they're doing in that regard, and we'll continue to harvest their expertise as we refine that. Suzanne Hall and Carla Lobos will be in front of the board on October 24th to do an in-depth report about what each of these mean and really those key professional development offerings that we've had over the last year and a half that again align with this initiative. And so I'll come back to you at the next meeting with the math outrageous outcome, and then they'll follow right behind me at the following meeting to give you that in-depth report on what have we been doing in terms of professional development. So this is the slide, Mr. Christensen, that speaks to your question about there must be an average. And so one of the things the board had asked is if we're going to set these lofty goals, these outrageous outcomes, what are the interim benchmarks that we're going to be monitoring and make sure that we're moving the needle toward 100%? And so I promised that we would have a body of work around what we're calling interim goals. So what on the surface sounds like it would be a very easy thing to do becomes very complicated. And the reason that it's complicated and complex is we're slightly in front of some mechanisms that would inform this work. So for example, you spoke to it, we were just together with Superintendent Reichdahl last week who talked about the ESSA plan, the consolidated plan. It's not approved yet, so the data analytics that go along with that, we're still kind of waiting for those. The State Board of Education has a body of work where they have indicators of the education system health, they call it. And they have data analytics that they use to monitor benchmarks that are very similar to the ones that we've identified. They have a report that they did last December that's for 14-15's data and 15-16's data. So again, we're in front of that report. We would expect to see the report for this set of data in December. We have the STAR, where there's a power of the predictive nature of that assessment. Only 44% of our kids right now are finished with that assessment data. So we don't have all the data in to really start to get into those analytics. And then SBA has what's called student growth percentiles. And frankly, I watched 3 webinars, read a paper and an executive summary, and still don't understand the student growth percentiles. So certainly I could not apply that logic to this particular presentation. My goal for you is to have a deep understanding of at least these 4 bullets, so that when we apply the logic for these interim goals, that it aligns with the logic that's being used by the state and the assessment systems that we already have access to, so that we're connecting the dots, not we have a system by which we measure their outrageous outcomes that doesn't align with any of the other kind of systems out there for measurement. So I guess there's a lot of words to say. We have an extraordinary opportunity that you've provided us as a board to have a system-wide foundational set of benchmarks and data sets to monitor this work over time that's going to align with the state's work. And so I'm super excited about that, and I really want to make sure that we're thoughtful and intentional about identifying those interim goals in a way that has some alignment.
On the,
Any questions
on the data
about that?
dashboard, so we started that work several years ago. And since then, we've kind of shifted our paradigm of how we're looking at this, come up with outrageous outcomes, come up with benchmarks there. Is the data dashboard still going to integrate into with what we're doing?
Yes, and that's exactly why we kind of put a push pin in it while we were trying to figure out this whole outrageous outcome body of work, is so that those two things, again, it's about alignment. So right now, Mark has the database for all of the benchmarks I just talked about, plus the data benchmarks for everything else that we talked about last year. Those databases are complete. So now what he's doing is interfacing with an outside contractor that's really going to use that data and make it pretty on our website. So we could expect to see those that data interface on our website, where the goal is to have it done by January.
And it will, if I remember, it's been a year or 2 since we've had a presentation on it. It'll be user-friendly to show the picture to the public,
Correct.
both how the district and its students are doing, but also can parents get on there and see their individual student? I can't remember if that was part of it.
We hadn't talked it through that far, but certainly I can explore that with Mark.
Yeah, okay, we'll talk about it later. I didn't remember if that was part of it or not. Okay, it's more of a show the big picture for how the district students are performing and improving or not improving, and how we can improve our processes. Okay.
That has been my focus to this point. If we want to add a layer on at some point, we absolutely
Not
can.
right now. No.
Thank you.
So next steps, interim goals, there's all of these, these unknowns in the future. But, so the interim goals will be changed up. We still have interim goals, correct? Interim goals, the Washington State, there's 4 different things. It sounded like there was quite a bit of ambiguity in what's going to be measured and how it's going to be measured. So I just wanted to know how that affects our interim goals and our benchmarks on these. Is that not, are we not talking about the same thing?
We are. So what I would like to do, Amy, is use they have a mechanism by which they've identified benchmarks for their indicators, for example. So when you go on the State Board of Education, you can see their 3rd grade reading, and they say, well, the step increase that you should have made is 3.3%. I'd like to understand how the state board came up with the 3.3%, and if that logic works for us as a district, I'd like to apply the same logic to our interim goals so that we're consistent. Instead of us having a whole different way that we're thinking about interim goals, like if the state board and OSPI is thinking about it and we can apply that same logic to what we're doing, it makes sense to me that we do that. Instead of having, we're thinking about it one way, the state board is thinking about it another way, OSPI is thinking about it another way. Let's connect the dots between those 3 systems.
When will we have that information?
My goal is to have it to you by January. And again, the state board's report was done in December. The federal government needs to act on Washington's plan for the ESSA. So the goal is January, so that it's a thoughtful, comprehensive, aligned set of interim goals.
Okay.
So the last piece for next steps is about the outrageous outcomes print materials campaign. In front of you as board members, you have two sets of print materials. One's a larger kind of placemat looking outrageous outcome. I'm going to call it a poster. Those are, yep, thank you, Amy. That will be blown up to really big and will be delivered to every school and replace the old, there's a strategic plan goals, so it'll replace that. And then it's not even trifold, it's more than trifold. That pamphlet is a pamphlet that also visually represents the outrageous outcomes. So those are the two sets of print materials that have been made to start to inform the public, our teachers, about our outrageous outcomes. All of our principals either have or will have shown an introductory outrageous outcome video to teachers and to their staff by October 12th. I was at McGee Elementary yesterday, and the principal reported that when she showed the video, there was a lot of enthusiasm and excitement from her teachers about the outrageous outcomes. The feedback I've heard as I've been out that people are excited about them. So the word is definitely getting out there. There's also an outrageous outcomes tab on our website now. So we'll just continue to layer on pieces of our campaign so that people know about our outrageous outcomes and are as excited about them as we are. As I close tonight, I wanted to just leave you the board. First, I wanted to recognize the board's leadership in providing us the opportunity to adopt what I would call a growth mindset, especially as they apply to these outrageous outcomes. So Carol Dweck, she's a renowned psychologist from Stanford University, and as you go into our schools, you'll see evidence of what's called a growth mindset, and that's definitely Carol Dweck's work. Our teachers are utilizing that language with our students, so definitely as student staff, we're interested in it as well. But what she talks about is the power of our mindset as it applies to our beliefs, especially when you're taking on things that are very challenging. So certainly, as an organization, to take on a 100% goal is absolutely challenging. And the power is we can either have a fixed mindset where we let outcomes, whether they're positive or negative, define who we are. That approach can cause us to become defensive or blame. It's not a place of forward thinking. Or we can have what we call a growth mindset, where we look at setbacks as opportunities to grow and improve. So certainly as an organization, we're very excited about this work. We're highly invested in this work, and we absolutely believe, like I said, that it's a game changer. So we appreciate your leadership, and we look forward to continuing to stay the course.
Thank you, Ms. Whitney. And as we've said many times, we appreciate your work and all the staff and all the teachers that make the visions come true. Any questions or comments for Ms. Whitney from the board?
Anyway, this my whole heart is wrapped around this whole program, and I know. Anyway, through studies, through everything else, we've learned that like the strategic outcome or the strategic plans that we've had in the past have been somewhat successful, but not as successful as other school districts have been. And part of the reason is we need to have very easily recognizable, easily definable goals that the whole district, all the teachers, that all the principals know, and that we are going toward a common point, a common destination, and so that we all know we're going in the same direction, in the right direction. And these goals, though they were created by the board, there were a lot of things that went into it. One of them being that we asked, or Mrs. Whitney went out or Superintendent Whitney went out into the district and talked to all the principals and asked them different things. Anyway, there were so many things that came into these and the success. And obviously, I think we did a good job of narrowing in on things that really are going to be key to our kids' success, because they're very reflected in this new plan by the Superintendent of Washington State. I think that's very telling. But one thing that I want to be very clear is I don't want to be afraid of bad data. And one of these that showed that our reading actually at third grade has gone down a little bit. So that's what these outrageous outcomes are for. We're coming in, we're bringing them in, we are analyzing this, we are recognizing what the data is, and we're saying, is there a reason for this? We recognize as a board that when you implement brand new curriculum and teachers teach like this, and then they have to teach something totally brand new, oftentimes there is a dip in data. We're okay with that. I just think it needs to be explained. I think we need to understand it because we are prepared for lots of huge growth in data that will happen. But I want, I want more data than I'm even being given right now. And part of it is because of the culture of the district. So I want teachers to understand that we want data clear across. We don't care if it's bad, we don't care if it's good. We're not gonna shoot you down for it. What we want is we want a plan, we want an improvement plan, we want a, hey, this is what happened, this is what's going to happen, this is where we're going. And it's that growth mindset that's critical. We are getting our kids to achieve at levels that they've never before achieved at. And that's the goal of our district. And that's what we need to be focused on. And that's what all of this data is for. And I don't want to be afraid of it. If anybody knows what the stock market looks like, it's infinitely higher than it was in 1950. And our students' data should show the same kind of trajectory. But there's going to be dips along the way, and we're okay with that. We just want that growth. So that's where we're at, and that's where we're going, and I'm hoping to have these benchmarks more solidly put, and I can tell that Superintendent Whitney is like sweating bullets over there because she knows that I want, we want, I don't know how many feel the same way I do, but that data is a critical piece to our growth, and having really clear goals is critical. So that's where we're going with this.
Thank you for the presentation. Could you go back a couple slides to the key actions that first 5 years impact success in school and life? So this is great. If anyone wants more information on these, our study session was essentially, they brought in leaders from all these areas and explained what they are and how the impact they've had, and it was really fantastic as a broad overview of the continuum of services that's being provided to try to address this issue. I just wanted to comment briefly on the Reach Out and Read one because it looks like, oh, maybe we haven't done anything on that, but since that's primarily a healthcare-based initiative, in the last year, Pasco, a large clinic in Pasco, Tri-Cities Community Health, started that program, and they have thousands of families in their clinic, and they've added that in addition to our clinic. And I met with another large clinic that hopefully will add this in the next year. So that's been very successful, and that's expanding. And again, the idea through all these different programs is that we're going to reach as many of those 900,000 kids that are not fully prepared and provide the resources they need to be ready right from the start, so that we're not trying to expend resources to catch the students up, and some will never catch up. So it's really an exciting time, and if you want to be excited, go back and watch the study session. It was very heartwarming and exciting in this area.
Could you go back one more slide? So this one looks a little painful. This is where we are with one of our outrageous outcomes, and I like this slide. I mean, this is what we're working on. The good thing is we've got a lot of room for growth, and I'm curious. And so there's two challenges we face. One, we need to know where we started, and then we need to know where we're going. Right now, this looks bad, but maybe compared to the rest of the state, this is where everybody else is too. I had asked about WACID's data for the rest of the state. Where do we align? It might be that we're just starting out behind, and we'll never catch up to the rest of the state. But so if I was preparing a data dashboard, it would have this on it. It would have where we intend to be in a year or 2 or 3 or 5 years, and then it would show our growth over time. I don't need a lot of data. I don't have time to crunch it, and I'm not sure you guys do either. But something like this that just shows where we are, and then I would expect that behind the scenes, you guys are looking at what's going on, what do we need to do to make this better, and then where are we going to be, and what are our interim goals next year, 3 years out, 5 years out. So this is what would like to see, and I would like to see in reference, where are we with respect to the rest of the state? So it doesn't look good, but I mean, it is what it is, and we'll do what we can to improve it, so thank you.
Well, Carol Dweck says that this isn't about us looking good or being the smartest person in the room. It's about using it as an opportunity to learn and grow. And certainly that's where we're at. And we recognize we're going to acknowledge this is where we're at. And then I have experts that work with fantastic principals and great teachers that'll figure out exactly what we need to do for each one of these kids.
Well, even though our goal is 100%, I mean, and there's a great difference between this and 100%. I'm willing to bet that this is probably not too far off from where many other people are, if not most.
Well, and it's interesting that you mentioned the WaKids data because as I was trying to make sense of the report, and I'll send it to you as a board from the State Board of Ed, and again, it's not being able to see the calculations behind like the data chart was frustrating. And so I have an email into Mr. Parr, who, developed the data. But the reason I'm bringing it up is you talked about, Dr. Richardson, students, they define kindergarten readiness as students meeting that 5-year-old or 4-year-old or 5-year-old benchmark in all 6 domains across the state. And they identified a target, like, we should be at this point. Across the state, in every cell, there was a negative, and it was a negative anywhere from like a -3% to like a -11%. So that puts like our WaKids data into some context, right? When kind of something to compare it to. So that's my goal also, is to be able to have some, reasonable, rational, explainable set of interim benchmark goals that are based in a rationale like what the State Board of Ed is doing.
Perfect. Again, thank you. That slide shows, with the great challenges come the great opportunities. We have a lot of room to grow. We know we're going to improve. We know that the staff here in the Booth Building, Miss Whitney and her team, are going to give all the teachers all the tools that they need to help move these benchmarks, move these outrageous outcomes, trend them up towards 100%. So thank you again to everybody and all the work that's been done here. Any questions or comments from the public at this time to the board on this topic? All right, seeing that we have no public comment on that report there, we'll move on to agenda item number 10, action items. This evening we have no action items. And I get to practice my reading here on agenda item number 11, the consent agenda. We have personnel, we have warrant approval, we have the second reading of board policy revisions 3410, student health, 3412, automated external defibrillators, 3413, student immunizations and life-threatening health conditions, 3414, infectious diseases, 3415, accommodating students with diabetes, 3416, medication at school. We also have New Horizons High School relocation project change order number 4, overnight student travel for the Chiawana High School Family Career Community Leadership of America to the Winter Leadership Meeting in Leavenworth, Washington. Overnight student travel for the Pasco High School Marching Band and Color Guard to Puget Sound Festival of Bands in Everett, Washington. Out of country overnight student travel for the Pasco High School International Club to Japan. Out of state overnight student travel for the Chiawana High School Ski Club to Powder Mountain Ski Resort in Eden, Utah. Out of country overnight student travel for the Chiawana High School Ski Club to Red Mountain Ski Resort in Roslyn, British Columbia. Out of state overnight student travel for the New Horizons High School FFA to the National Leadership Convention in Indianapolis, Indiana, and industry tours in Racine, Wisconsin, and Chicago, Illinois. Overnight student travel for the McLaughlin Middle School at Natural Helpers Camp in Rimrock, Washington. Overnight student travel for the Pasco High School Distributive Education Clubs of America to the Fall Leadership Conference in Bellevue, Washington. And out of state overnight student travel for the Chiawana High School FFA to the National Leadership Convention and industry tours in Indianapolis, Indiana. Discussion from the board? I'd entertain a motion.
I move to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Second?
There's a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda as presented. Ms. Smith, please call the roll.
Mr. Christensen?
Yes.
Dr. Richardson?
Yes.
Ms. Langen?
Yes.
Mr. Lerman?
Yes.
Mrs. Phillips?
Yes.
Motion carries. Consent agenda approved as presented. We have a future agenda items.
So 2 meetings in October, the first of which will have a study session on October 10th. The focus of that study session would be to start to develop some parameters for phase 2 of our long-term facilities management plan, and we're going to start with a conversation around portables and start to discuss and explore with the board your philosophy behind portables, et cetera. I'm also potentially going to be requesting an executive session that would start at 5:30 to start the superintendent evaluation process for this year. During the board meeting, we will have outrageous outcome regarding math, a technology update from Mark Garrett, and then Amy and Steve will be presenting to the rest of the board the superintendent evaluation tool that they've worked really hard on over the last year. And then at the end of the month, on October 24th, we'll have our first levy planning session as a study session, and then that professional development update that I referenced, potentially a capital projects update, and for sure a data bite, potentially science, if not Read 180 data. We are requesting an executive session under RCW 4231G for personnel. It's probably going to take about a half an hour. I'm requesting 30 minutes.
Thank you, Ms. Whitney. Thank you for attending our board meeting this evening. It was fairly quick, and we appreciate your interest in Pasco Public Schools. And the board will recess into executive session.